Welcome to My Morning Cup, a podcast produced by Costa Media Advisors and brought to you by the generous support of the Tennessee Valley Authority. To learn more about TVA's impact on our community, follow TVA on Instagram at TVA and on Twitter X at TVA News. My Morning Cup, where we have interesting conversations with genuine people. I'm Mike Costa, your host. My guest this week is Barry Large. Barry is 1/3 of the team that formed Access America, one of Chattanooga's great entrepreneurial stories. Barry and his partners Ted Ailing and Allan Davis have been a big reason for Chattanooga now being known as an entrepreneur hotbed. Barry, welcome to My Morning Cup. Before we find out how three guys who graduated from Samford University in Birmingham helped remake Chattanooga, let me ask, what's in your morning cup?
Black coffee, always black coffee.
Always black. Caffeinated or decaf?
Oh, it's definitely caffeinated.
Yeah. How many a day?
You know, up until about a year ago, it was 2 a.m, and that was it. And
Yeah.
I'm kind of sad to say that I've added a couple cups
Yeah.
the last 2 or 3 years. So I have an afternoon cup now, and usually maybe a early before lunch.
I'm a little older than you, and I used to drink caffeine all day. All I drink now is decaf.
Okay.
I just like the flavor.
All right.
Yeah. Do you have a particular brand or anything?
I'm not that snooty with my coffee. My 13-year-old daughter now, for whatever reason, has fallen in love with Starbucks.
13?
Well, she doesn't drink. She doesn't drink coffee.
Yeah.
There's a lemonade drink off of
okay.
TikTok that she's heard about, and so now I find myself in the mornings dropping her off.
Yeah,
I'll
stopping
grab
at
some
Starbucks.
Yeah, and it's pretty strong coffee. So
Oh yeah, it'll get your day going. Well, you were born in Chattanooga, but you moved to Knoxville for a few years when you were what, 2 years old?
2 years old.
And when did you come back?
We came back when I was about 5,
Yep.
in about 1983.
And what brought you back?
So my dad, a little story of my parents, they moved to Chattanooga in the late 60s. They were both...
From where?
They were from the southwest corner of Virginia.
Oh, wow.
So this is not Richmond. This is not the D.C. area. This is rural
Is this up near
Appalachia.
Bristol?
Further into the mountains.
Oh,
so
wow.
this is the border of Kentucky and West Virginia. So it is the most sparsely populated county in Virginia, all coal mine country.
Yeah.
So they grew up, both their parents were coal miners. My dad went off to the military, which he attributes to kind of, I wouldn't say saving his life, but charting it on a different direction.
Well, it exposed him to things he hadn't been exposed to and probably gave him some discipline and organization that he didn't
He
have.
saw the world and then realized that when he was out that he was going to leave Dickinson County. And so he got a job in the brick business. General Shell Brick was the company. Got a job at the front desk, didn't have a college degree, worked his way up into sales and sales manager. And so had kind of created a nice life for my family, but kind of a lower middle class life in the 70s. My brothers talk about, I have 2 brothers, both older. One's 10 years older and one's 8 years older.
So they give you the routine of, oh, you've been spoiled.
They had a different childhood than I did.
I get that.
McDonald's was a huge treat.
Yeah.
When they were kids. So we had been transferred to Knoxville in the early 80s. And at that time, the economy was not in good shape. Housing was in a bad recession. So the brick industry was really suffering.
Well, interest rates were what, 18%?
They
to
were,
buy a
yeah. We
house?
think this is bad in the current environment. It was a lot worse.
Yeah.
And so inflation was high. There's kind of like stagflation going on. And so he had been in Chattanooga most of his career. We'd moved to Knoxville. And then he had gotten an opportunity. They were going to shut down the Chattanooga location for his business. It had dwindled down to very little. It was called Key James Brick was the company. And he was probably, 33 years old. And he stuck his hand up one day in a meeting with the CEO and said, I want to buy it. And
Well,
he said,
that's pretty bold.
He was, but unfortunately he had no money.
Well, it helps.
Yeah. So they were going to either shut it down.
Yeah.
And so the CEO liked him and offered kind of a deal where he could have inventory on consignment. and take out a loan and kind of buy it over time. Mm-hmm. And it had the volume and the local business wasn't high. So that moment changed my family's trajectory. It changed my life because fortunately, about the time he had a chance to buy it, the economy started
coming up. Yeah.
And so he got it at a very advantageous time, which, a lot of business is good timing. Mm-hmm. You can call it luck, but you got to be ready to capitalize, but it's good timing. And so we moved back to Chattanooga when I was 5 or 6, kindergarten age. And those first few years were tough years, I think.
So what year was that?
83.
Okay, so it's the Reagan administration.
It is.
And you
kind of booming. All of a sudden, this boom coming out.
Boom hitting 84 probably,
Yeah. And so over the next few years, my childhood, elementary-wise, was my parents and my mom worked in the business, bookkeeping, self-trained. She didn't go to college either. And it was a real family business. Probably at the time, had 10 employees, and they worked in the business and built it, and that was my...
How about you and your brothers? Would you work summers? And
For sure, yeah. So from an early age, summers I spent at 6, 7, 8, 9 years old, just with my mom in the office, kind of piddling and messing around, and that evolved into helping out with some bookkeeping. And then by the time I was 13, 14, 15, it was my dad saying, Nancy, he needs to get out of the office and get on a sand truck and help deliver sand.
Yeah.
And so stuff like that. So I would help be in the trucks in the summers, help strap brick.
What did that teach you?
Well, it taught me a lot about just seeing all sides of the business, understanding all the different jobs and roles that it takes to be successful. And, it taught some how to work hard.
Yeah.
How to understand, again, how hard some people work in different ways.
So you were working summers, or would you work when you were in school and after
Not
school?
Not too much. Yeah, they didn't force me to do that.
Yeah.
It was summertime.
So in growing up, you're in a family business, because I grew up in a family business too, and I'd work summers. And did you like it, the business?
Oh, I did. When you're a kid, there's a part of you that's always trying to push up against and rebel against anything involving kind of your parents, but it was clearly just symbiote, like the osmosis. I was soaking it all in. And so I thought I wanted to run as far away from the building materials industry as I possibly could, but I didn't kind of realize that the entrepreneurial spirit was kind of being infused.
Yeah, that was there. And in wanting to run away to something, what was something you wanted to run away and
I didn't quite know. As a kid, I loved sports. I loved all things sports. I loved playing it. I loved following it. I loved statistics, the analysis part, all of that. So, as a 10, 11, 12-year-old, I knew I couldn't play professional sports, but I thought I was going to be an announcer, be involved in it in some way.
Who was your idol as an announcer?
I would say probably, Jim Nance is kind of the king. He, in the 90s, he had started in the early 90s. He was in his 30s when he got some big jobs.
He was doing big stuff when he was in school at University of Houston.
Yeah, right. So, kind of following his career, because I love all the things that he calls, I love, kind of March Madness and golf and NFL football. And then those 3:30 CBS college football games, SEC.
Yeah.
Always loved. So all those announcers.
So you learned about entrepreneurship really from your dad, because what I'm taking from it is your dad took a huge chance.
He did. Yeah. We when he took that chance, he had a 5-year-old, 15-year-old, and a 13-year-old. So, one of the things I've seen over my career now, which is, effectively started in 2001, so over 20 years, is, the more you have to lose, the harder it is to take the leap in entrepreneurship.
That's an interesting thing. We had Brian Elrod on a year ago, and Brian's got text request and also had Educational Outfitters. And he said he worked in the corporate environment for 20 years. And he said something really interesting that you just hit on. I couldn't afford to be an entrepreneur.
That's it. we invest a lot now in the venture capital space and technology. And for the most part, these teams are in their 20s.
Yeah.
They're single, they haven't started a family yet, and they just don't have as much. So you have stuff to lose, but
you're not responsible for
not
3-year-olds.
And the longer, if you find yourself in your 40s and you've got 3 kids and maybe you're paying for some education and your burn is high, it's harder. It doesn't mean it's impossible. It's possible.
Yeah.
But it's a harder decision to make.
Yeah. I find that to be so head on, because there are a lot of people who work those corporate jobs who just never take that leap. And it's not so much out of fear, but it is out of fear of not being able to provide for your family. So you grew up in an entrepreneurial household, you worked in the family business, and you go off to school at Samford.
Samford. We always joke, we say it really fast, so people think Stanford. But it's Samford in Birmingham, Alabama.
Yeah. And you were buddies with Allan Davis, and I talked to Ted Ailing about this. He said he met you guys because he wanted to pal around with the cool Macaulay guys.
Well, I'm not sure about that. We weren't very cool. Allan and I met in 7th grade at Macaulay in history class. And so we've been friends and now business partners I'm 46. So
wow,
for 34 years. Yeah. So Allan and I went to Samford together, and then met Ted in the first week or so.
Yeah, I think what he told me is you guys were headed to fraternity rush, and he didn't want to go in alone.
He didn't. And Teddy's personality is big and bold and gregarious. Yeah. And so he decided that he was going to be friends with us, and whether we liked it or not, it's going to happen. So
it seems to have taken. Yeah. So you guys, best friends through college, in the same fraternity, having a good time, I assume.
Had a good time. We went through business school together and learned some stuff, but spent a lot of time together studying, in quotation marks. Really, it was getting to know each other. A little bit of studying, but hanging out, talking, just really growing our bond.
So when you graduate, you go your separate ways.
We did for a bit. So I still was kind of confused about what I wanted to do next. We actually all moved in together just after college in Birmingham. Ted got married quickly. Allan and I weren't quite ready to grow up. Ted got a job at C.H. Robinson, which is it's the biggest freight brokerage still in the country. And that'll be part of the story upcoming. And then I thought about going to law school. The sports announcing path didn't seem so clear. I'd left that behind 10 or so years ago. And so
but you could always do a podcast on sports.
You can. Yeah. And so my dad said, now would be a good time as he starts to segue out of the business. And my mom really was leaving the business. My oldest brother had come in 10 years before and was running the sales side. And he said, now would be a good time if you wanted to come back and kind of over time take over the back office finance end. Brother Brent be sales and I'd be the rest. And I said, sure. I wasn't totally, I think, 2 feet in.
Yeah.
But I came back home, and this is 2001. I think it was a few weeks before 9/11. I always remember that. And did that. I came back home. I was 23-ish.
Yeah.
And started to learn the business. Ted and I still were talking every day. And he had moved to Nashville with his company. He was doing, Teddy's an incredible salesperson.
Which company?
C.H. Robinson. Yeah, the freight brokerage. And so we would talk every day. We began to talk about, there were all these loads that he was acquiring that C.H. Robinson really didn't want to move. It just didn't fit their.
Explain what you mean by that. The loads didn't want.
So what a freight broker does is pretty simple. Is if Coca-Cola as a customer needs something moved from Chicago to Chattanooga, they're going to call a bunch of trucking companies and try to book a truck. Well, there's this layer in between, this broker, who will go, okay, I'll quote you $1,000 for this load, and I'll go find the truck, and I'll match it together, and hopefully I'll make a margin on that. I don't always. Mm-hmm. And so you become this kind of intermediary kind of balancing out supply and demand.
So you're a matchmaker.
Matchmaker. Yeah. Kind of like, and if you go to a freight brokerage floor, and there's a lot of them in Chattanooga now, it's almost like a stock trading floor.
Yeah.
And
it's pretty wild.
Yeah. Something, I was not aware existed before Ted got that first job. Mm-hmm. But we began to cook up this idea, and it's looking back, it's, you
guys are what, 23?
Yeah, I'm not sure why we thought we could do it.
So you're working in the family business.
Yeah.
Not sure.
My heart wasn't in it.
Because I worked in family business when I got out of school, and I understand that.
Yeah, and so
particularly if you have siblings in the business,
right? And he'd been in a long time. Everybody, Brent had done a great job, and all my friends were still in Birmingham. My best friend was in Nashville, and so this is the reality is that I pitched, and I still remember, like, Ted, what if you move to Chattanooga and we start this on our own and we use the brick company as our first customer? Because the brick company would bring in 10 to 15 loads of brick on flatbeds from all over the country every day. We were using different trucking companies to do it. So if we could convince my dad to let us get those loads, then we had our first customer.
Was someone at Key James in contact with these? So
yes.
there was one dedicated employer
yes.
too. So that was, in a sense, your in-house broker.
Correct. And the main, listen, my heart wasn't totally in my business, but honestly, and I wanted, I think long-term to work for myself. But also I just wanted my best friend moved to Chattanooga.
Well, and I think this is part of the story too, is that because I had talked to Ted a couple of weeks ago, y'all wanted to recreate your fraternity house, basically.
Yeah, why not?
That's part of your workplace.
Right. And so, I think Ted probably in his mind had a more grandiose idea that we can build a $1 billion company. That was evolving for me. But at the time it was, I think, more simple in my motivations. It was to do something fun with my friends. And that wasn't really feeling in the family business.
Yeah. What does that pitch look like? You pitched your dad?
First was Teddy. I had to pitch him because he had just gotten married, or he'd been married a couple of years. They just had their first child, Mallory, who's now a freshman in college, and they just bought a house in Nashville. And so he was going to lose like $15,000 on his house, and he didn't have that to lose at the time.
I mean, Nashville was a hot market then, but not like
that. And so it was convincing Kelly. I'll never forget. Teddy and Kelly came down, and we had lunch at the old Fridays.
Yeah.
And we got Kelly on board. And then
I got to ask, what did it take to get Kelly on board? Married 2 years, you buy a house, you have your first kid. Oh, honey, we're going to move to Chattanooga.
Yeah.
And by the way, I won't be making any money for a while.
Yeah. The one thing the one kind of cushion insurance policy that Ted had, I'm not sure if he knew this yet, but once we talked to my dad, is if this doesn't get off the ground, you can sell brick.
Yeah.
So,
he's still young enough.
Yeah, he would have been an incredible brick salesman. Yeah. Now, it wouldn't have had the ceiling that
you have now.
That we have now with what happened to Access America. But when you're 23 and you got
you're not thinking
bills,
too far.
Yeah. So Kelly got on board, and then we pitched my dad on letting us handle the freight.
Did you put together a business plan and a pitch itself, or did you just sit down and say, Dad, we got this?
Yeah, I've never written a business plan. So.
There you go.
And so we pitched the idea, and a big part of it was, he allowed us for the first year or so to, in essence, gave us a loan.
Yeah.
We had this intercompany account where he would took on Teddy's salary. We hired one person. We got the freight and we created a separate company. But
they were your first customer.
They were our first customer and lender.
Well,
in a lot of ways. And so, looking back, he took a risk on two naive 23-year-olds. It wasn't like a huge financial risk because it was low overhead.
Did at any time he say, Barry, this is crazy. I mean, I love you, but I can't do this.
No, he was, it was kind of in his, I think he loved
seeing you do.
He loved, yeah. And then all of a sudden, I think he saw me get on fire.
Yeah.
In a way that probably I wasn't in the brick business. And so
that's got to be gratifying.
It was good. Yeah. And so over the course of the next, this is 2002, over the course of the next 10 years or so, all of a sudden, the first year we did 2 million in sales. Second year we did 5 million, and we kept doubling.
Wow. In
sales, 10, 22, 44. That first year, Key James Brick, which was the family business, was 85% of our revenue. The goal I kept setting for Teddy was, let's keep winning that down. Let's keep winning it down.
Make that a smaller percentage of your customer base.
And so, I mean, I can't remember exactly the time frame, but I bet you by year 7, it was 0.5%.
Wow. What was the delineation of duties? What did you do? What did Ted do? What did Allan do?
So Allan came on board about a year later. He was still in Birmingham. And so luckily, I think we all, and this is important when we look at entrepreneurs now, teams that we invest in, is do your founders have complementary skill sets? And for a team now we would invest in many times, it's one of your founders needs to be technical, like being able to code. Mm-hmm. But this is not a software business. Access America wasn't. And so it was clear that Ted was the salesperson. He was set the vision, motivate, recruit people. He is very extroverted and very type A. And then I was going to be the kind of the logical finance, but pragmatist.
Did you play that role in college?
For sure.
Your friendship?
Yeah. I mean,
Ted says, let's go do this. And
I always knew. I mean, I knew at some level, instinctually, when I pitched him to be a business partner, that we would be a good match. Yeah. We weren't redundant. And we would stay out of each other's hair. Mm-hmm. That's another thing, is when you have people founding teams that have the same skill sets, they can a lot of friction over who's doing what and why.
Well, you want to go where you're comfortable and what you're good at, and then you're fighting over that.
Right. And then Allan, as our third partner, became really operations. But Allan is like me in a lot of ways, but very different in that he does not care what people think about him. And he has very creative, off-the-wall ideas. And so he really brought a lot of just creative thinking to the company. And so it meshed very, very well. So
you're having this doubling growth every year. And what's the revenue get up to?
So by 2014, when we sold, it was $500 million in sales.
And how old were you?
At that time, I was early 30s.
Nice.
Yeah.
Nice. Yeah. Very good.
As the pragmatist, I will disclaim that, like, in the freight brokerage, the gross revenue, you keep 12% of it as your gross profit. So it's
still
great,
a big number.
number.
Yeah, still a big number.
Yeah, our EBITDA, our earnings would be 3, 4, 5% of that big number.
Yeah, that's still a good number. And you did that in a matter of 10 years.
We did. It happened to be, and again, similar to how my dad got into owning his own business at a really advantageous time, not deliberately. It just happened that way. We got into the industry at a very good time.
But if you're not prepared to take advantage of timing, it doesn't matter what time you get into.
You got to execute. Yeah. But we were the model, the freight brokerage model, didn't exist until around 1980 because the industry was deregulated. Mm-hmm. It was actually Jimmy Carter in the late, I think, 79.
Yeah.
And so it used to be that there was only so many like trucking tokens you could have, like a taxi industry. And so he broke that apart, and it created this massive long tail of many trucking companies. And so you can now broker freight. So it was
opened up competition.
Prices went down. So it really wasn't a very old industry. And then as technology was, becoming better, it began to creep into this industry. And then I think we really had a benefit of being young and naive.
Yeah. Did you ever imagine it getting that big?
No, I didn't. Yeah. Teddy says he did, but I didn't.
Sales guys always good to say that.
Did, yeah. And so I think we're lucky to not have all this baggage of industry knowledge.
Yeah.
We looked at it in a very new, fresh way.
Well, you were in a new industry and you were new to it, so there weren't any old rules that you really had to follow.
And I think our main source of success probably was we created a very aggressive compensation structure for our producers.
Talk about that a little bit, because I think that's an important part of the story, is taking care of your people, and almost at a sacrifice to the founders. Sacrifice is probably the wrong word, but
our philosophy is I'll take a smaller piece of a bigger pie.
Yeah.
And so, would that be equity and ownership? I'll sacrifice my own ownership to get to the right people who are helping build it. And I believe in doing that, my ultimate return will be greater.
Yeah.
And I kind of call it long-term greedy.
Yeah.
Don't be short-term greedy.
Because that doesn't last.
It doesn't last, and it's not building something durable.
Right.
And again, if you align all the people doing the work together with being incentivized long-term, you're going to have a bigger entity.
Got more people bought in. You got everyone rowing in the same direction.
Right. So we did that with our compensation, because freight broker goes out and kills his own meat and brings it. So you go out, you book loads every day and create them out of thin air. And so you give them a higher share of that. You allow them to grow their own little. We looked at it as you grow your own business within our business, and you can add people underneath you and create. We had people we would call pod leaders that had 65 people underneath them booking freight, and they would get a cut of all that, and they're making $500,000.
Wow, and that's still going on in Chattanooga today.
It is, yeah. Now, so Steam Logistics is a company that's downtown now on 4th and Market. That was our business that spun out of Access America. So we're still in it. And then off of the Access America story, I think we counted up over 25 freight brokers that started in Chattanooga that had DNA of Access America. So it's now, I would argue it's per capita, Chattanooga has the most freight brokerage jobs
I can see
anywhere
that.
in the country. Chicago has the most in total.
In mass.
But per population, it's here.
I want to talk a little bit about the personal side of that growth period. So you guys started, it's growing, you're having a good time. You got married about, 2010?
Mm-hmm.
And things are good. You hadn't sold the company yet. You have your first daughter. Talk about your personal health.
I will. But before I get there, I'll talk about the reality is the stress of that scaling was incredibly hard, in that, I was still a kid in a lot of ways. And I took the pressure on me of finance,
You saw the numbers every day.
I saw the numbers every day. And fast growth is exciting and amazing, but it can be really, really hard on cash. The more you grow, the more AR you have to collect. And in the trucking industry, when you get Starbucks as a customer, they're going to set terms. They're going to say, we're going to pay you in 60 days. Well, the trucker that you have to pay to move that may need to get paid in 8 days.
Yeah.
So you've got this massive gap between when you're collecting and when you're paying out that you have to finance. And so all this growth was amazing, and we kept hiring.
It's stressful.
Every time we announced we've hired 7 more people today. To me, it meant, I'm not going to cuss in here, but oh crap.
Yeah.
This is not good. And so, we were, all this outward success, we were on the edge a lot more than I wanted to.
Well, you're young guys, and all of a sudden you've got, 400 or 500 families that you're responsible for?
You do. Yeah. At our height, we had about 800 employees. And so there were moments where, this is in 2007, 2008, before we really hit our inflection point. We hit a point where our growth also created strong cash flow, but that scaling in the late 2000s was high growth, barely making it by cash wise. And we were, I'd be holding a big stack of checks to carriers that was this thick. Like, we need to wait another day before I mail these for that big deposit to hit.
Yeah.
And so looking back at my 28-year-old self, I kept way too much of that inside. I didn't share enough of that. I didn't want to disappoint or slow down the growth, and Teddy's championing and rah. And it was, and we cut it close at times.
Was it a feeling of, I don't want to be the stink in church?
Yeah. I mean, the CF no.
The CF no.
Yeah.
And I would imagine most businesses kind of go through that point of, we're growing, but man, we don't have any cash flow.
We don't. Yeah. And you got to capitalize on this opportunity. Yeah. But we did it all through another thing. We now do a lot of venture capital where we invest and get equity in businesses, but we didn't even know what that meant at the time. So we built it bootstrapped.
Yeah.
We did it through bank debt.
But you own the whole company.
We did. Now it worked out.
Yeah.
But, venture capital is there a lot of times to allow you to grow profitably.
Yeah.
And so and venture comes in, it funds that loss so you can keep growing. So we were kind of a venture growing company without the venture.
Without the capital.
So once you break through,
yeah.
And then by 2010, 2011, we were a fast growing company that also had strong EBITDA. And then you're very bankable. Yeah. And every bank comes out of the, like, banks come out when you don't need them. They're not there when you need them. And so we had broken through, and now, luckily, we had preserved our cap table because we didn't take on that venture capital. But there's trade-offs.
Yeah. So really, you guys are on top of the world. Things are going well.
They were. Yeah. Again, I personally got to a point where, again, I was still not totally mature, hadn't met my wife yet. The stress of the business was felt like smothering me, and I had to step away for about 9 months. Quasi my choice.
Yeah. Quasi. Yeah.
But it's the best thing that ever happens. Yeah. And that's actually when I, if you remember, played around a bit with media with Nuga.
Oh yeah.
So I kind of took some time away.
Because you guys bought Nuga.com.
We did, yeah. And so came back into the business and took back over the whole finance side around 2011-ish. And then we began doing a lot of early stage venture capital.
That was Lamppost Group?
That was Lamppost Group. We found ourselves, we were now running a large business. It became bureaucratic. It became different. You had to have policy, and it was a big boy business, and it wasn't as fun for us. And so we found ourselves more gravitating towards the early stage of investing and Lamppost. And so we began talking with one of our competitors, a big strategic competitor, Coyote Logistics. Mm-hmm. And it just became to make sense for us to merge with that business. We both were potentially on the path to become public. And we felt like together we could go public a lot faster. And it also, by being a strategic buyer, they would be okay with Ted, Allan, and myself just stepped aside. Mm-hmm. And we had all this other stuff that we wanted to do. So
it wasn't one of those deals they said, we'll do this, but you need to stay in place.
No, that was so attractive about it.
Yeah.
When a financial buyer buys you, like a PE firm, they want you to stay on.
Right.
But when a competitor buys you, I mean,
they don't care what.
In fact, get out of our hair.
Yeah.
And so that combined entity with Coyote was going to go public, and then UPS came in and offered. Yeah, and luckily we had taken a good bit of stock in the combined entity.
It seems like your DNA, the three of you, is in building.
It is. Yeah, the most fun part is the starting and building.
Yeah.
And now it's for us, we're a bit too old to do it ourselves. It's vicariously living through others by
the way you do it, Brickyard now.
Brickyard Dynamo is helping fund it, but also, being there as mentors and advisors on the journey.
But along that path, you had some challenges.
I did.
Health-wise.
Yeah. So right around the time we were thinking about selling the business, this is 2012, I go to the doctor to get a root canal fixed, go to the oral surgeon, and he sees some tissue while he's in there that he doesn't like and refers me to somebody else. I get an x-ray. The ball keeps rolling. Within a few days, I find out I have a stage 4 tumor in my lower right jaw. What's
that do to you? You're on top of the world.
Yeah.
I mean, you got a $500 million company.
Sure.
And you guys are getting ready to sell it, and you got to be thinking you're invincible.
Yeah.
And then that hits you. So what's that do emotionally, mentally to you?
Yeah, it was tough. We've about 8 days after I find out about the diagnosis, we find out that my wife's pregnant with our second child.
Wow.
So at the time we had a year and a half old. And so now, realistically, based on some of the feedback I was getting from doctors, I wasn't sure I'd be there for her birth.
Right, because you're stage 4.
Stage 4. And so everything just became about everything. Obviously, everything goes to this.
Yeah, it goes to the side.
It all becomes about, you treat this like it is a company, or like that you have to solve this problem.
Yeah.
And so that summer I spent in Houston at MD Anderson. I had a 14.5-hour surgery to take out my jaw from here to here. And so now I have my fibula in here.
Wow.
With a bunch of metal. And so I have skin from my leg in my mouth people don't wince when they hear this, but the weeks after I had my surgery, I had leg hair in my mouth. So I would twist my leg hair with my tongue. And so that summer was pretty terrible. The worst part, this was in May, the surgery. Then I find out, just to make sure they got it all, in August, I had to start at Erlanger 36 radiation treatments and chemo, just to make sure that they got it. And that was a lot worse than the surgery. So now, luckily, the only good thing that came from that radiation was it killed all the hair. So that's all gone. But really the only lingering effect from it is I have really bad dry mouth, because the salivary glands are permanently gone. They're gone. So
because you don't have that in your leg.
Right. So that was 12 years ago.
How did that change your perspective? So you're young when you start this business, you're blowing and going, and you even said you matured a little later than Ted.
I did, I did, yeah.
And all of a sudden this hits. How does that change your outlook on life and everything?
The mixture of dealing with your own mortality when you live your 20s in a pretty semi-reckless way. Carefree. That's a nice way to say it. You didn't take care of you only have one body, and all of a sudden now I've gone through this, I brush with death. I have young children. I have a family and wife. You get some perspective. Yeah. The further I get from it, the lessons are there, but it doesn't feel as acutely.
You kind of get back to life.
Yeah, you get back to life, but my mid-30s were packed with a lot. With a young family and
that's a lot on your plate.
It was,
and then
we
you're still doing business.
Yeah. So that all happened. Selling the business, marriage, young kids, cancer, all happened within about 3 year span.
And you're now 12 years cancer-free?
12 years cancer-free, yeah.
Congratulations.
Yeah. Thank you.
So you get through all that, you sell the business, and you guys, honestly, you sell the business, you could go do whatever you want. A lot of people would just go find an island.
Sure.
But you're kind of restless, huh?
Yeah, I'm 46, so I've got a lot of productive years ahead of me. Yeah. And certainly I get to take fun vacations to fun places, but the idea of just sitting on a beach sounds awful. And so I'm lucky that now I get to kind of choose how I spend my time. One of the things as I look back, my desire to start a business so early is I don't think I ever desired or wanted to work for someone else. Always kind of been this pushback against authority a little bit,
including family.
Yeah. And so now I have the financial freedom and the free. I'm not a slave to any one thing. I get to choose my work week, but I love being involved. I love still investing in companies. I love
talk about what you do now.
Yeah.
Not just Brickyard, but in the community and how.
Sure.
What's a typical day for you?
Yeah. So my main two gigs are two venture capital funds. One is called Brickyard, which I'm one of the partners of, that we invest in early stage technology companies. But the one caveat when we invest is you have to come build it for a year in Chattanooga, amongst other founders who are building as well.
Did you invite young companies to come pitch, or how did they find out about? I mean, how does that work? That someone says, "I'm going to go pitch Brickyard"?
Yeah, so it's mostly relationship.
Yeah.
Cameron, Doody, and Matt Patterson are the main partners who day to day run it. They founded Bellhop, which we were investors in early, and just all of our connections in the industry. I mean, the best, it's like employee hires. The best employee hires or the best company opportunities are referrals.
Yeah.
And so you just nurture your network and you begin to build a brand. And then our founders bring us deals from other people they know. So many of them are from California, San Francisco, New York. So they've got a network, and they're like, "Hey, you got to talk to this team."
Those relationships are critical, regardless of what you're doing or what stage your business is in.
For sure. Yeah, this is all about people and psychology, and that's what runs everything.
So you're very involved in the community too. So what are some of the things you do because you're a native Chattanooga, even though you went away for a couple of
years?
Sure,
no, Chattanooga through and through.
What is it about Chattanooga that keeps you so dedicated here? And then I have a question for you about Alabama.
Okay, all right. I think the great part about Chattanooga is like it's big enough to do something special, but it's not so big that you don't feel like you can have an effect.
Well, I always said when I moved here that I've been able to do things here that I couldn't have done in Memphis, that I couldn't have done in Nashville. Yeah.
Yeah. And so...
And Chattanooga's welcoming.
Right.
If you're willing to work.
But it's big enough to where, if you're in rural Tennessee, you can't do what we've done because you don't have the ingredients of culture and to attract bright young people to come move here. So we've got that infrastructure. It's big enough to be an attractive place. It's a cool place for these teams to move. When they come here from Europe and New York, they spend a day or so and they're like, "Holy crap, I didn't realize this was here." But yet it's not Nashville or Memphis. It's a startup in a lot of ways. It's a maturing startup, but I think we love just you can have an effect.
Here's my question about Alabama. All right, Ted, you, Allan all went to Samford.
Yeah.
Patrick Wells from Stone Source went to Samford.
Yeah.
Cam went to Auburn. Mm-hmm. What's in the water in Alabama that's attracting all these entrepreneurs to Chattanooga?
That's a good question. In a lot of ways, I viewed Birmingham very similar to Chattanooga in its culture and ethos. I mean, it's a bit bigger. But I don't know. That's a good question. I mean, we, Cam and Matt and Stephen Blah, who just started Bellhops, were all from Alabama. And of course, it was a connection because Matt went to Vestavia with Ted, is how we ended up recruiting him here.
You got Bellhops here.
So,
well, and you guys are advocates for Chattanooga too, because VaynerMedia came here because of your efforts.
Yeah, mainly Ted. Yeah, people think, Teddy's not from Chattanooga, wasn't born here.
Right.
But they think he's the Chattanoogan and Allan and me, right? But I'm not even sure who we are. And then they also think that Teddy went to Macaulay, and Allan and I were the ones who went to Macaulay. They just assume that he's through and through Chattanooga.
Well, I think he wears the crown proudly.
Yeah, he does.
Absolutely. I do have one last question for you, Barry, but before I get to that, I do want to remind everyone who sponsors the podcast is the Tennessee Valley Authority. I want to thank them for sponsoring My Morning Cup. And you can follow TVA on social media to learn more about its multifaceted mission of service, and visit TVA.com/do-good-here to explore exciting TVA career opportunities. And, you got some time on your hand. You might want to check out those TVA career opportunities. Last question for you. I've really enjoyed this. Thank you for spending some time talking about your career, because it's not only interesting, it's one that's had a great effect on Chattanooga. Last question for you. What would you tell your 25-year-old self is important for a happy life?
One, I think it's impossible to retrofit. I needed to go through the things I went through. We say this a lot with our founders. Like, we can sit there and watch a team make a mistake. We see it coming. They're like, we're thinking about doing this. There's two paths, and we're like, we give them advice of the path to go down, and they don't. They go down the other one, and they learn from it. Like, and so, in a lot of ways, if I was to follow the advice that I would give now, I may end up at the wrong place.
Yeah.
But one of the main principles I lean back on in my life and in business, but also in everything, is play long-term games with long-term people. And similar to that, in the same vein, I always tell my kids, you'll become the average of your 5 best friends.
Yeah.
And so who you choose to spend time with, who you choose to be your friends, that's whether you like it or not. The parenting is done once they get to be, it's all about friends once they hit about 11 or 12.
Yeah.
And so I was lucky to pick 2 great friends who shared the same kind of core values as me. Even though there's times where we almost broke up and there was a lot of turmoil we endured. And so it is, again, it's just like play long-term games. In that same vein of, I talked about being long-term greedy.
Yeah.
It's like play the long game. And that might mean sacrificing in the short term.
That goes for every aspect of your life,
Not
just
aspect.
business.
Yeah.
Well, Barry, thank you so much for joining us. It's been a great conversation, and I appreciate you being part of My Morning Cup.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening to My Morning Cup, a podcast by Costa Media Advisors. If you liked this episode, please share it with a friend. I release a new episode each week, so be sure to subscribe on Spotify, Apple, Google, or wherever you listen to podcasts.